There are days when you wake up and can't explain why you feel so exhausted. Everything seems the same: work, calls, the usual conversations. Yet deep inside, something no longer feels right. You smile because you have to. You speak because you need to. But when night falls and the room turns dark, you can only hear your soul whispering, "Am I living or just existing?" Everyone goes through such phases, when everything outside remains intact, but the world within has begun to crack. Carl Jung called it the call of the unconscious, the moment when your soul gently knocks and asks, "Is it time to look within?" And perhaps that's why you've chosen to listen to these words. You didn't stumble upon this video by accident. It found you, at the right time, in the right way, like a subtle sign from the universe. Because when the soul is ready, the world reflects what you need to hear. This isn't a video to help you change someone else. It's an invitation to return to yourself, slowly, honestly, and with enough strength to begin again. Now, take a deep breath, open your heart, and allow the message waiting ahead to find its way to you. 1. The beginning, the inner calling and the necessary collapse. There will be days when you wake up and feel nothing but emptiness. The cup of coffee is the same as always. Your work still awaits ahead, the face in the mirror still familiar, yet something in that gaze is no longer the same. A quiet emptiness that no one sees, only you can feel. It isn't loud, it isn't clear, it's just the sense that everything around you has suddenly become unfamiliar. You look at your life and realize you are living, but somehow you've stopped truly living long ago. That is not a weakness. It is the soul's first calling. Jung once said, "No awakening happens in comfort." When you begin to feel tired of the very life you've created, when all efforts to please others no longer bring you meaning, that is not collapse. It is the sacred initiation of a new journey. This breakdown does not come to punish you. It comes to free you. It is the door your ego fears, but your soul has long awaited. In Jung's philosophy, this moment is called individuation, the process through which the soul reclaims its right to live authentically, after years of being confined beneath the mask of "I'm fine." Have you ever wondered why you feel empty, even when you have everything others desire? A family, a stable job, friends, travels, yet somewhere in your heart there lingers a nameless sadness. That is when your soul whispers, "This is not me." And that feeling, that sense of not belonging is, in truth, the most trustworthy one of all. On the psychological level, Jung believed that the unconscious does not speak in words. It speaks through suffering. When your mind becomes trapped in roles, the strong mother, the steadfast man, the exemplary employee, the unconscious will find ways to send you signals through dreams, through exhaustion, through the feeling of being lost. It is not that you've lost your way. It is your soul saying, "Enough, you are not lost. You are simply stepping out of the comfort zone of your old self." If you are in that phase, know that there is nothing wrong with you. You do not need to fix yourself. You are being invited to listen to yourself. Every inner crisis is a sacred signal. It does not say, "Fall apart," but rather, "It's time to change." Why? Imagine you are standing in a familiar room, a space that holds every memory, every role, every promise you once believed in. Suddenly, the lights go out. In that darkness, you hear the sound of your own breathing. At first, it's fear, but then, as you allow the silence to envelop you, you realize this is the first time in many years that you've truly heard yourself breathe. That is the beginning point of the soul. Not when you are happy, but when you pause amid the ruins and accept the truth that you can no longer pretend. We live in an age that glorifies control, success, and positivity, yet forgets one essential truth. Excessive control is the prison of the soul. Jung once said, "Those who do not face their darkness project it onto the outside world and call it fate. The darkness you do not face becomes your fate." When we refuse to face the truth, we begin to blame circumstances, other people, or life itself. But the truth is, what exhausts us does not lie in the outside world. It lies in our attempt to sustain a version of ourselves that is no longer real. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You can see this in the rhythm of your own life. You wake up in the morning, drink your coffee, scroll through a few headlines, then drown in your to-do list. Emotions are suppressed, the inner voice pushed aside. Each time you feel lost, you soothe yourself with a movie, a trip, or a few positive quotes online. But then night falls, silence returns, and your mind begins to speak again. That emptiness reappears, as if someone is calling you from deep within the dark. That is not depression, that is awakening. When your old life no longer brings you energy, it doesn't mean you've lost your worth, it means you're about to enter a higher level of consciousness. Just as a seed must crack open to sprout, your soul too needs a collapse to begin its growth. This collapse often appears in many forms: a broken marriage, a lost job, a friend who turns away, or simply the feeling of, I can't keep living like this anymore. Jung called this the threshold of transformation, the place where the soul and the ego meet in a wordless dialogue. The ego fears losing control, while the soul only wants to live truthfully. And when these two forces collide, your inner world begins to tremble. If you are in the midst of that trembling, understand that you are exactly where you need to be. The pain you feel is the contraction of rebirth. Don't rush to positivize it. Don't force yourself to be happy. Let the pain do what it was born to do. Open the door. Try sitting still, just for 5 minutes. No music, no phone, no effort to meditate properly. Just sit. You might feel empty or heavy. Don't run away. Listen to it. The way you would listen to an old friend trying to tell you something that has been buried too long. That is the first invitation from the unconscious. When you choose to sit with the emptiness, you are answering that call. Why is this important? Because we have grown used to living in a world that constantly urges us to do something. When tired, we work more. When sad, we look for something to fill the void. But Jung understood, only in silence does the unconscious begin to speak. Every answer you seek outside is meaningless if you do not dare to sit with yourself. Collapse, in truth, is a gift. It strips away the illusions that once kept you alive to give you the chance to live authentically. It shatters every should, every must, so you can see what is real. And while the world may call it a midlife crisis, Jung would call it the rebirth of the self. Remember, the soul does not care how old you are, who you are, or how many times you've failed. It only cares about one thing, whether you dare to live truthfully. And when you begin to be honest with yourself, everything around you changes, not because the world has changed, but because your presence has. So, if today you feel like you're falling apart, know that nothing is wrong. What is falling apart is not you, but the shell you once needed to survive. What is collapsing is the old self so that the real one can finally breathe. Do not fear the darkness in your heart, for that is where the first light is born. And then, a natural question arises. If this calling is real, why do most of us stay silent before it? Perhaps, sometimes, pretending to live feels easier than truly waking up. 2. The deception of a normal life. You might think that you've already overcome the hardest part, that after all the breakdowns, the only thing you need is to return to a stable life. But it is precisely in that seemingly peaceful moment that something subtler begins to seep in. Falseness wrapped in normality. It doesn't hurt as sharply as a crisis does, but it slowly wears down the soul in silence. Jung once said that the ego does not care about truth, it only cares about safety. And when the mind grows weary of confronting fear, it immediately builds a familiar circle where everything is predictable, where you can breathe without feeling too deeply. But the price of that stability is numbness. Have you noticed how each of your days has begun to look frighteningly the same? You wake up, make coffee, check your phone, see the same familiar faces online, read a few headlines, then sigh. Everything unfolds as if there were a script already written for you, and you're merely playing your role in it. You smile at colleagues, nod when others talk about a stable life. Yet deep inside, you feel something in you is hollowing out, day by day. Society teaches us that stability is good. A steady job, a house, a few safe relationships, but few mention that stability can also be the sweetest trap of the soul. When everything becomes normal, people stop searching, stop questioning, stop listening to the inner call. They are no longer afraid, but they are no longer alive either. In Jung's language, this is when the persona, the social mask, has fused with the skin. The true self is so deeply buried that even the person wearing it no longer knows when they disappeared. I once met a woman in her 50s. Every morning, she woke up early, carefully applied her makeup, prepared breakfast for her family, then went to work in a flawless outfit. To anyone looking from the outside, she was the embodiment of stability. But when I asked, "What makes you feel happiest in your day?" she fell silent for a long moment before softly replying, "I don't know. I can't remember anymore." In her eyes, a light had gone out, not because of age, but because her soul had been left somewhere among her roles. Jung called that moment wearing the persona too long, when the mask has been worn for so long that it merges with the flesh and the real self can no longer breathe. At a deeper level, the normal life we live is in truth a collective defense mechanism. Society fears disruption because disruption demands change, and change forces people to face the truth, something few dare to do. So, we create an unspoken agreement. I will pretend to be fine, you will pretend to be fine, and together we will preserve the order of this illusion. We call it positive culture, optimistic thinking, good energy. But behind it all lies a tremendous fear of truth. The truth that we are lonely, that we are not happy, that the things we once pursued no longer make us feel alive. The ego, according to Jung, functions like a gatekeeper. It always protects you from feeling insecure, but at the same time, it traps you within that very insecurity. It says, "Don't change. At least right now, you're safe." And so, you choose safety over freedom. You choose comfort over authenticity. You choose to keep pretending, because pretending is easier than staring directly into the void. The cruel truth is this: we can live our entire lives inside a golden cage without realizing it's a prison. And when the soul begins to stir within, we don't listen, we silence it with work, entertainment, social media, or positive advice. If you pay attention, modern culture carries a very clear, unspoken message. Don't bother anyone. Don't complain. Don't feel too much. But when we try not to feel too much, we also lose the ability to feel true joy, because the heart cannot choose selectively. If you block pain, you block joy as well. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And that is exactly what's happening today. We are so busy that we no longer have time to feel how we are actually living. You might see yourself in that image, waking up, putting on the same kind of clothes, listening to the same playlist, doing the same work, laughing the same laugh, then falling asleep with the feeling that maybe tomorrow will be just like today. That is not living. That is the repetition of memory. When a person repeats yesterday without remembering why they are alive, that is not stability, it is paralysis. Their soul is still there, but it is covered in dust by countless habits, like a beautiful guitar left forgotten, still with its strings and its shape, but no longer with a sound. And then, we begin to believe that this is normal. We believe that everyone lives this way, so we must too. But the truth is, normal does not mean healthy. Normal is merely a pleasant name society gives to collective surrender. Look around you, how many people are truly living, and how many are merely performing? How many dare to admit that they are tired, that they long for something more real, more profound? There is nothing wrong if you once chose stability. Every one of us needs safety to survive. But if that stability begins to make you feel empty, if each morning you wake up sensing that a small part of yourself is slipping away, then that is not failure, it is a sign. It is a signal from the unconscious. The mask has cracked, and when the mask begins to crack, the ego becomes terrified. It will try to convince you that you are only tired, that you just need rest, that you shouldn't think too much. But the truth is, your soul is reclaiming its place. It doesn't want you to just be okay. It wants you to be real. You don't need to give up everything, nor do you need to suddenly change your life. You only need to begin with something very small. Allow something imperfect to happen without rushing to fix it. Maybe it's a meal that turns out badly, a plan that doesn't go as expected, or a morning when you don't manage to be as composed as usual. When that happens, don't be quick to label it a failure. Feel the discomfort, because that very discomfort is the first test of freedom. Freedom does not begin with breaking all constraints. It begins with daring to stay still within your own imperfection. At first, you'll find that feeling strange, as if you're doing something wrong, but that is your soul being unlocked, because only when you stop striving to be stable do you finally begin to live authentically. Jung once said, What you need is not a comfortable life, but a meaningful one. And that meaning is not found in making life smooth, but in daring to step into the cracks where light can enter. A normal life is merely the glossy paint over an old wall. It makes us believe we are still alive, even though the soul has long fallen silent. And sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is not to change the world, but simply to stop pretending. Because when that layer of normality begins to crack, the first thing that rises is not light, but pain. 3. Pain as a signal of transformation. There are days when you no longer know what you're tired of. Everything seems to be functioning. Your job still pays, your children are fine, your friends still laugh, but inside, there's an emptiness you can't name. A fatigue not of the body, but of the soul. You try to think positively, to fill the void with things that seem to make others happy. But the harder you try, the stronger that feeling grows, like an undercurrent quietly swelling beneath the mask of calm. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. No one truly awakens without passing through suffering." Pain is the compass of the soul, the knock on the door from your deepest self, pointing to the parts of your darkness that have yet to be seen. We are often taught to avoid pain rather than to understand it. When something makes our hearts ache, we immediately look for anesthesia, a movie, a cup of coffee, a few hours scrolling on social media, a cheerful conversation. But the moment you try to push those feelings away, you are pushing away the most precious message your soul is sending you. Jung saw the unconscious as an intelligent system. It doesn't speak in rational language, but through symbols, sensations, and symptoms. When the ego clings to control for too long, the unconscious fights back. It sends strange signals: anxiety, insomnia, exhaustion, restlessness, the feeling of being lost, even in a crowd. We think something is wrong with us, but in truth, the unconscious is saying only one thing: enough. The problem is, the ego doesn't want to listen. It exists to control, to preserve the image of me that the world can accept. The ego resists change because change means the death of part of itself. So, every time pain appears, the ego rushes to deny it. I'm just tired. Maybe it's the weather. Everything's fine. But the more we avoid it, the stronger the pain becomes. It does not come to destroy you, it comes to make you stop. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Jung reminds us that when we refuse to confront the unconscious, it will control our lives, and we will call it destiny. Imagine a man sitting alone in his office, papers piled high, phone ringing endlessly. Yet in that moment, everything suddenly feels meaningless. He lowers his head onto the desk, and for the first time in years, he begins to cry. Not because he has failed, but because he realizes he has lived too long trying to please everyone else. In that moment of exhaustion, he stops running, stops pretending to be strong, and stops avoiding himself. Pain forces him to look directly within, and right there, a truth begins to bloom. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Sometimes, darkness doesn't come from grand things. It comes from the small ones you've ignored for too long. A relationship that makes you shrink, a job that makes you forget joy, a promise to yourself that you never kept. Every time you say, "It's fine," while you're hurting inside, you add another brick to the wall separating your soul from life. And when that wall grows too thick, pain must become the hammer that breaks it. Jung did not see pain as punishment, but as a ritual of transformation. Just as a seed must crack open to rise, a human being must also break apart to find their true essence. Every fracture serves a purpose. When old things fall away, whether a role, a relationship, or a belief, do not rush to call it loss. See it as birth, because only when the old dies can the new begin to live. Some people do not truly feel this until middle age. After years of caring, giving, and sacrificing, they suddenly realize they've forgotten what it feels like to live for themselves. When their children are grown, when work finally stabilizes, when no one needs them in the same way anymore, they begin to hear the faint echo of a part long forgotten. It is the part of the soul that still longs to create, to love, to be free, to be itself. But the ego trembles. It's too late to change now. And so, they remain silent. But pain does not. It keeps calling. If you have ever felt like you were falling apart, know that what is breaking is not you. It is the personality you created to survive. It is the shell that once protected you, but has now become a prison. When it cracks, you feel pain, but that pain is the sign of life. Just as a wound can only breathe once the bandage is removed, what you resist persists. Everything you resist will continue to follow you until you choose to face it. The modern world has made us believe that suffering is a mistake, that we must heal quickly, return to normal as soon as possible. But normal is merely accepted numbness. When you try to silence pain with medication, with busyness, with quick-fix self-help methods, you are patching the mask instead of stepping beyond it. Pain is not a pit, it is a map. It shows you where inside yourself things remain divided, where something still needs to be seen, where something still needs to be loved again. So when pain arises, don't ask, "How do I make it stop?" Instead, ask, "What does it want me to see?" That question opens the very gate where every Jungian journey begins. Sit down, just for 5 minutes. No music, no phone, nothing to do. Take a deep breath and let every feeling come through. Maybe it's loneliness, anger, sadness, or fear. Don't name it, don't judge it, just listen. Pain will speak if you are silent long enough. And you will see pain is not the enemy. It is the messenger. It does not come to break you down, but to lead you out of the comfort zone, out of the old roles, out of the story you have memorized. And at the end of that path, something awaits you, something true, something longing to be seen, something that has never had a name. Pain is the most sacred part of transformation because it is proof that the soul is still alive. It reminds you that you are not dead, that something within you still longs to live, to love, to be free. And when you begin to listen, the outer world begins to change as well. Strange signs appear: a meeting, a book, a dream, or a video like this, arriving exactly when you need it most. Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity, the causal connecting principle. When the inside of you changes, the world reflects it back through meaningful coincidences. It is not magic, it is the harmony between the soul and the universe. And that is exactly what we will speak of in the next part when you listen, and the world begins to whisper back. 4. Synchronicity, when the universe reflects the soul. Perhaps you are hearing these words on a quiet evening, when the world outside has already fallen asleep, yet you still lie there, staring at the ceiling and wondering, why did this video appear just when I needed it? You didn't search for it, but it found you, not through logic, not through planning, simply by arriving at the right moment. And in that instant, you feel something strange, as if someone or something is whispering to you through the screen. Jung called this moment synchronicity, the causal connecting principle, where two seemingly unrelated events are linked by an invisible thread, a shared layer of meaning. The modern world teaches us that everything can be explained by science, by logic, by probability. But Jung saw deeper. Synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see. When consciousness opens, you begin to realize that reality is not meaningless. Everything, a song, a meeting, an old message, or even a small mistake in your day, is a reflection of your inner world. It isn't the universe speaking to you, but you speaking to yourself through the language of symbols. Once, I heard a woman say that after her mother passed away, she began to see a white butterfly fluttering around her window every morning. At first, she thought it was just coincidence. But then, each time the butterfly appeared, she remembered her mother not to awaken grief, but to remind her that love never disappears, it merely changes form. To others, it was just an insect. But to her, it was the language of the universe. And Jung would say it was the synchrony of meaning, where the outer world does not betray us, but speaks in a language only a resonant soul can understand. Synchronicity is not magic. It is the natural mechanism of the psyche when the unconscious and the conscious begin to align. When you are no longer divided within yourself, the world outside no longer feels separate from you. What you perceive as coincidence is, in truth, reflection. The universe is not intervening, it is responding. Like when you throw a pebble into a lake, the water ripples, then returns your reflection through its waves. The world works exactly the same way. Think about the times when you scroll through your phone unconsciously, with no real intention, and suddenly stop at a video. The first sentence echoes, It's time to stop running from your pain. Your heart freezes for a moment. You don't know why, but it makes you want to cry. That is not the algorithm. That is a message. A part of you has sent out a signal, and the world, through technology, through the internet, through images, is simply responding, just like you are listening to this video now. You didn't search for it. It found you. Jung believed that the collective unconscious always operates through symbols. When the mind opens, we begin to perceive signs in life, not with our eyes, but with our intuition. A number repeating, a chance encounter, a book you once ignored suddenly falling into your hands. These small things, meaningless to others, awaken memories, stir emotions, and surface the very questions you need to answer. That is how the universe mirrors the soul. You only feel those coincidences as messages from intuition when they accidentally resonate with your own experience. Many people ask, how do I know what is a real sign and what is just imagination? Jung would answer, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. It means that when you are connected with your inner self, everything outside naturally becomes clear. The coincidences are no longer games of chance. They become a map drawn and guided by your own inner world. The world is not a cold, mechanical system. It is a mirror, and that mirror only reflects truthfully when you dare to look. Each time you face your fear, each time you are honest with yourself, you alter the image within. And when that happens, the universe cannot help but respond. You speak through emotion, and the world answers through events. You send out loneliness, and you meet someone who mirrors it. You send out gratitude, and something beautiful returns. It is not superstition, it is the resonance of energy and meaning. Surely, there are people hearing this who will smile and say, I know that feeling, because they've experienced synchronicity in their own way. Maybe it was when they thought of someone, and that person suddenly called, or when they were at their lowest point, and a random line in an old book brought them clarity. They understood that there exists a deeper layer of reality, one where things don't happen because of something, but for the sake of something. And that realization alone is enough to make them believe that this world still has a soul. When Jung spoke of synchronicity, he wasn't trying to prove miracles. He was simply revealing that reality has a soul-like structure. Each time you are willing to listen, it responds perhaps through a small sign, a sound, a dream, or a person. And the fascinating thing is, once you start paying attention, synchronicity happens more often, not because it appears more frequently, but because you have learned how to truly see. Try this. Each day, write down 3 coincidences that caught your attention. A color, a symbol, a strange feeling. Don't try to explain them. Don't force meaning upon them. Just write them down. Because every time you record one, you are practicing the art of dialogue with the unconscious. You are learning the language of the soul, a language not made of words, but of images and sensations. One day, you will realize that synchronicity is no longer mere coincidence. It is a conversation between you and the universe. You ask through your actions. It answers through symbols. You send emotions. It returns experiences. And the entire journey of life turns out not to be about seeking something new, but about learning to read what has always been right here around you. There is nothing coincidental about you hearing these words. Nothing meaningless about their arrival at the exact moment you need them. Perhaps you have just gone through a long silence or a night full of tears. Perhaps you are standing on the edge between letting go and holding on to hope. Whatever it is, synchronicity does not come to give you an answer. It comes to remind you that you are being heard. The world is still whispering to you. It's just that before now, you weren't quiet enough to hear it. Reality does not betray us. It only speaks in a language the soul understands. And when you begin to understand it, you'll see that everything that comes your way has a reason not to frighten you, but to lead you closer to your true essence. But that is also when another question arises. If the signs are already so clear, why do we still hesitate to follow them? Perhaps because, at the end of every true sign, there is always a door we fear the most. The door of our own fears. 5. The door of fear. Perhaps you have come a long way on your journey, but at some point, everything seems to come to a halt. You no longer feel progress, no longer hear signals, and every emotion begins to turn back and surround you. Each time you try to move forward, you hit an invisible wall, something you cannot see clearly, but can feel deeply. Fear. Fear has no shape, yet it knows how to speak through silence. It hides in every decision you postpone, in every word you swallow, in every dream you extinguish, simply because you believe you are not enough or can't do it. Carl Jung once said, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." Every gate that leads to the true self is guarded by fear. Not because life is cruel, but because the soul needs a point of initiation. Jung called this shadow confrontation the battle with the inner dragon, the one we've been running from our entire lives. That dragon is not the enemy, it is the guardian of truth. It holds the light you have not yet been brave enough to face, and until you dare to confront it, the gate will remain closed. Most of us are taught to overcome fear, not to walk with it, but overcoming often means denying. We convince ourselves that fear is weakness, that we must be strong. Yet Jung pointed out the opposite. Where your fear is, there your task is. The place you fear most is exactly where you are being called to grow. When we avoid fear, we live only half a life. When we face it, we begin to be reborn. Try to remember the real turning points in your life, the first time you dared to speak your truth, the moment you walked away from a toxic relationship, the day you started again from zero. They all began with fear. Not happiness, not motivation, but fear itself forced you to truly live. Jung called that the sacred threshold, the place where the soul begins to shed its old skin. There is an image I always remember. A young man standing at the edge of a cliff, the wind blowing hard. Behind him is his old life, safe, predictable, but one that has slowly been killing him day by day. In front of him is the abyss, where he has no idea what awaits. He looks down, terrified, his legs trembling, his heart pounding wildly, but deep within, he knows that if he doesn't jump, he will never truly live. And then, he closes his eyes, lets go, and falls. In that moment, he is no longer the victim of fear, he becomes the witness to it. He realizes that what's truly frightening is not the abyss, but the act of standing still forever. Fear is not evil. It is the boundary between the ego and the soul. The ego always seeks safety, while the soul longs to expand. When you feel fear, it is a sign that you are coming close to something sacred. Like a seed splitting from its shell, it doesn't know there is light above. It only knows that the darkness is breaking open, and that trembling, aching feeling is life itself beginning to rise. In today's world, people are taught how to stop being afraid, as if fear were a disease. But Jung saw it differently. He said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. When we try to extinguish fear, we are killing the signal that leads us home. If you fear loneliness, perhaps your soul is inviting you to learn how to be alone without running away. If you fear rejection, maybe it is time to learn how to love yourself without needing approval. If you fear failure, perhaps what's waiting for you is not success, but freedom from the need to prove anything. Every fear is a finely wrapped lesson, and only when you open it can the light enter. So don't try to get rid of fear. Walk with it. When fear rises, whisper quietly to yourself, "Thank you for showing me where my soul is still fragile." That simple sentence changes everything. You are no longer the one being hunted. You are the one who sees the dragon in the cave, and once you see it, it begins to calm. There are people who spend their whole lives avoiding fear, believing that doing so keeps them safe, but in truth, they are slowly dying inside that safety. Jung once described the soul as a living being trying to swim toward the surface. If you don't give it the chance, it will pull you down instead with anxiety, sleeplessness, restlessness, and a sense of being lost. The more you fear it, the more it appears. The more you face it, the more it disappears. Fear has many faces. For some, it is loss. For others, it is the gaze of judgment. But in the end, all fears converge into one point: the fear of losing oneself, the fear that if we let go of the familiar image, we will no longer know who we are. Yet that is exactly what Jung called the death of the ego, not so that you disappear, but so that you can be born again as your truest self. And then something miraculous happens. When you dare to step through fear, you realize it never wanted to harm you. It only wanted you to be strong enough to love yourself again. Every step you take alongside fear is a step toward the light. And you will see on the other side, there is no monster at all, only you, in your most free and whole form. If today you are afraid of something, a decision, a loss, a change, know that you don't need to overcome it. You only need to walk with it, slowly, like with an old friend. Because fear cannot stand beside love forever. Once you look at it with love, it dissolves. Every soul has a chasm it must leap across, and perhaps no one can make that leap for you. But when you do, you will realize wings never appear before you leave the ground. If a part of you is still hoping for someone else to help, still asking, who will catch me when I jump, the answer has never been out there. It has always come from within you, from the part that is brave, clear, and still believes in life even after walking through the dark. For in that place, fear is no longer the enemy, but the teacher guiding your soul home. 6. No one will save you. Absolute responsibility for your own life. Everyone, at some point, believes that someone will come and pull them out of this stagnation. Someone who understands, a saving hand, a sign from life whispering, everything will be all right. But you have waited long, very long, and no one has come. Because, as Jung once said, who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. It comes from within you from the moment you stop searching for someone to save you and begin to realize that you are the one. Human beings grow up with a subtle illusion that someone will always take responsibility for them. As children, it is our parents. As adults, it becomes our lovers, friends, or society itself. We wait for others to understand us, to save us, to heal us, forgetting that no one truly owes us that. Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain, and no one can bear that pain for you." Yet facing this truth is a tremendous shock, because it means there is no one left to blame. No more, they hurt me, they don't understand me, they abandoned me. Only one thing remains, you and the truth. And the truth is, your soul has never been powerless. It has only been made to believe it is small. In Jungian psychology, the image of the child archetype represents the part of us that still waits to be cared for, guided, and saved. When you live in that energy, you exist like a child inside an adult body, always searching for parents in the form of other people. A mentor, a lover, a savior, but none of them can carry that role forever. Because life was never designed for you to be saved, it was designed for you to save yourself. There is a stage in the journey of individuation that Jung described with great clarity. The soul will begin to withdraw all external supports. The friends you once trusted will fall silent. The doors you used to knock on will no longer open. The comforting words that once soothed you will lose their power. Everything seems to turn its back on you at once, and you feel abandoned in the emptiness. But that is not punishment. It is the soul's rite of passage into maturity. It forces you to look around, then look within, and realize, no one is going to save me. But I am still breathing, still existing, and here, within me, there is still a companion soul, one that can walk beside me with empathy and understanding. When people stop waiting, they begin to live. Many women have found themselves in this stage, spending years praying for someone to come and understand them. But then, one morning, sitting in the kitchen, watching sunlight stream through the window, they suddenly understand. No one can truly understand them the way they can understand themselves. From that day on, they stop pleading for rescue and start creating. They begin to write, to meditate, to care for their bodies as if it were the only way to say, I am here for myself. And strangely enough, from that moment, the world begins to treat them differently. Not because the world has changed, but because the energy within them has. Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. When you refuse to look within, you allow the unconscious to steer your life, and you call that destiny. But once you take responsibility for every emotion, every reaction, every choice, you begin to reclaim the power you once gave away. It is no longer because of them, but because I choose it. And the moment you say, I choose, the world begins to reflect that choice. True freedom always comes with absolute responsibility. Responsibility here is not a burden, it is spiritual power. When you take responsibility for your joy, your sorrow, your pain, you return to the center of your own life. You are no longer controlled by others' emotions, no longer needing them to apologize, to change, or to understand, because you already understand yourself, and that is enough. Try writing down 3 things you are still waiting for others to do. Someone will love me for real. Someone will understand me. Someone will come and save me from this job. Then, cross out the words, someone, and write your own name instead. Not to punish yourself, but to see clearly that everything you long for lies within your own capacity. To love, to understand, to save all of it begins with you. When you start living with that mindset, everything changes. You no longer search for the meaning of life in someone else's words. You create it through every small action, taking care of yourself, speaking honestly, working with passion, facing your emotions. And that very presence, quiet, unpretentious, is the proof of a soul that has grown. No one will save you, not because the world is cruel, but because it respects you. It knows you are strong enough to stand on your own. You were not sent here to be protected, but to learn how to become the light in the dark. As Jung once reminded, I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. Once you understand that, loneliness takes on a new meaning. It is no longer a frightening emptiness, but the place where you meet yourself again. In that silence, everything becomes clear. The people you once blamed were only helping you grow. The hardships you once resented were only steering you back to the right path. And in that moment, you will smile softly. No one saved me, but I was saved by my own awakening. If you are now in a phase where it feels like no one understands, no one is there, know that you are being led to the soul's greatest lesson. Self-mastery. It is not cold or hardened. It is love deep enough not to need completion from others. When you stop waiting, you become the builder. When you stop blaming, you become the creator. And when you stop fearing, you become yourself. In the end, life never sends you a savior. It sends you circumstances so that you may realize you were that person all along. The one you've been waiting for has always been right here in your gaze, your breath, your heart. And when you finally recognize that, the only question that remains is, when there is no one left to blame, what truly remains within you? 7. Beyond fear. Touching true life. After all the collapses, the waiting, and the confrontations, there comes a moment when you feel a different kind of breath in your chest. Not the breath of anxiety, not of avoidance, but of freedom. Yet strangely, that moment doesn't arrive in happiness, it comes after fear. For as Jung once wrote, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. No one can awaken without having walked through the darkness of their own being. And when you have passed through it, what you discover is not a new light, but the realization that you have carried that light within you all along. On the other side of fear, there is always freedom, but freedom is never free. It always comes with loss. The loss of your old image, the loss of familiar roles, the loss of relationships that existed only because you once feared loneliness. That is the price of truth. Jung called it rebirth through dissolution, not a new life, but the resurrection of the old soul, after being cleansed of all disguises. When the ego begins to tremble, you will feel as if you are losing control. Everything that once felt stable starts to shake. You no longer feel drawn to shallow conversations, no longer wish to explain yourself to anyone, no longer need to be understood. The ego hates this because it is dying, but the soul, it is beginning to breathe. In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order, Jung wrote. A man once said he felt like he was dying when he left his stable job to pursue what he truly loved. But over time, he realized that what had died was not him, it was his fear of being judged. When you let go of what no longer fits, the soul gives back what has always been yours. But to do that, you must accept the point of breaking open. The image Jung often used was crossing the threshold. No one knows what lies beyond. But there is one law you can only see once you have stepped through. A person who forever stands on this side of fear will never see freedom, because light cannot reach those who only gaze at it from afar. It is like someone standing in a burning house, still clutching a few old things, a shirt, a photograph, or the safety of memories. Until he understands this, to live, he must let everything go. He steps out, carrying nothing but his breath and new eyes. Everything lost was only the chain. On the other side of fear, real life is not loud. It is not a celebration of victory, but a profound stillness where you no longer need to prove anything, no longer need to run away. You begin to see beauty in the smallest things, a drop of dew on a leaf, the morning light, the sound of your own breath. True life doesn't arrive when you have everything, but when you no longer need to hold on to anything. There is a small exercise Jung once suggested to his students. Each morning, ask yourself, if today I had no fear at all, how would I live differently? And then, choose one small action, say what you've been afraid to say, go where you've been afraid to go, try what you've been postponing. It doesn't need to be grand, it only needs to be real. Because freedom doesn't begin with an outer revolution, but with one small step within. When you start living authentically, the ego will resist. It whispers, what if people leave you because you've changed? But remember, those who leave when you become real were never staying for your true self. They stayed for the role. And when the performance ends, the audience leaves. Yet the beautiful thing is this time, you don't need them to stay, because you already have yourself. Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not everyone dares to touch that truth, for it comes with a high price. You must die in your old version to be reborn in your true essence. But if you ever see someone who has walked that path, you will notice the peace in their eyes, not because they no longer feel fear, but because they have learned how to smile even within it. At this stage, life is no longer a race, it becomes a dance. You no longer ask, when will everything be okay? But instead begin to ask, today, am I living true to my soul? That question, if asked every morning, will change your entire life. Because each time you answer, yes, you are lighting up another part of your true self. Authentic life is not perfect, but it is real. You will still have weary days, tearful nights, and moments of weakness. But now, you know that all of it is part of the flow. You no longer need to resist, because every small ache is a reminder that you are still alive. When you move beyond fear, you don't just step out of the darkness, you learn to love it. Because you understand that without darkness, light would never have meaning. Without loss, freedom would never be precious. And without fear, you would never know what it means to be brave. Remember, courage is not the absence of fear, but the act of moving forward even when your heart trembles. One small act each day, daring to speak honestly, daring to refuse what feels wrong, daring to listen to your intuition, is how the soul becomes free. And when you do that, you are telling the universe, I am ready to live authentically. And then you realize, awakening alone is not enough. It must be practiced every day, as a ritual of living. Each morning, take a deep breath, look into the mirror, and whisper to yourself, I choose to live true, even when I am afraid. That is the first declaration of freedom. Because freedom is not a destination, it is the state of a soul that has stopped pretending. 8. The conscious choice. And then, after all the turbulence, when the storm inside has finally quieted, you realize that life itself hasn't really changed, only the way you move through it has. All the noise outside still exists, but it no longer rules you. You begin to hear another sound, soft and clear, rising from deep within your heart, the voice of conscious choice. Carl Jung once wrote, becoming oneself is a task of a lifetime, not a moment of illumination. It is a sequence of small repeated choices made every single day with awareness. Awakening, according to Jung, is not a mystical event or a dramatic transformation. It is the steadiness found in the most ordinary details of life, the way you speak, the way you eat, the way you react, the way you love. All of these are declarations of the soul. Every small act, if done with full presence, becomes a sacred ritual. That is why Jung emphasized, you are what you do, not what you say you'll do. True awakening begins when you stop waiting for inspiration and start practicing consciousness. When you understand that there is no special day for change. There is only today and the decision you make in this very moment. You may not be able to alter the past or control the future, but you can choose how to live the present. And that choice, however small, has the power to turn the course of destiny. A businesswoman once told me that after years of therapy, reading and searching, the greatest shift didn't come from any grand lesson, but from the moment she wrote a single line, "I choose to live authentically." The sentence wasn't loud, had no background music, and no one witnessed it. Yet it was her first deep breath after years of suffocation. Because sometimes, awakening is simply stopping and saying to yourself, "I will choose to live differently." In Jungian psychology, every conscious choice leaves an imprint on the subconscious. Each time you choose to face rather than avoid, to love rather than judge, to slow down rather than chase the crowd, you are re-establishing the connection between the conscious and the unconscious. With every such moment, your soul becomes more audible and the outer world begins to shift accordingly. Not because it owes you anything, but because your energetic frequency has changed. Imagine the first morning after your awakening. There are no triumphant bells ringing, yet when you look outside, the sky is still blue, the trees still sway, and this time you notice every little detail. You are no longer in a rush. You no longer force yourself to be positive or strong. You simply allow yourself to be present, honest, simple, and light. That is what Jung called the return to the self, a state where you are no longer a victim of life, but its creator with every breath you take. Write down one line, just one. "I choose to leave behind what is old," followed by a single diagonal slash. Not to share, not for anyone else to see, but as a covenant with your own soul. The slash here is not a symbol of negation, but of connection where two lines intersect to form the center of presence. It reminds you that within every choice lies a meeting point between fear and freedom, between ego and soul, between who you were and who you are becoming. Each time you are aware of that moment, you are truly alive. When you begin to choose consciously, you'll notice something. The world doesn't change immediately, but the energy within you does. You no longer react out of instinct, no longer chase after emotions, no longer fall into meaningless loops. You become quieter but brighter, like a candle burning steadily, neither flaring up nor fading out, simply shining just enough to light the way. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Jung reminded us that the greatest privilege of life is to become ourselves. But what few people say is that to earn that privilege, you must choose not once, but thousands of times. Every morning when you wake up, every moment your heart wants to give up, every time fear whispers, "Don't." In the moment you choose, yes, even while trembling, you are living authentically. Don't wait for inspiration. Inspiration comes later. Begin with presence. By making a cup of coffee slowly, listening to the sound of water being poured, watching the steam rise, taking a deep breath, and feeling that you are here, in this very moment. That is not a trivial act, it is meditation. Every detail of life can become a doorway inward if you choose to step through it with full awareness. Awakening is not about becoming someone else, it's about stopping the pretense. It's realizing you don't need to be perfect to be worthy. It's feeling gratitude even for your mistakes, because they led you back to yourself. When you can look at your past without blame, only smile and say, "Thank you," you have begun to live a conscious life. You may have wondered, after all of this, what should I do next? The answer is beautifully simple. Choose. Choose to love yourself. Choose honesty. Choose to pause when you're tired. Choose to move forward when your heart calls. Choose to look deeper into your own eyes each morning and say, "I'm here, I see you, I won't abandon you anymore." That is awakening in its purest form, not light descending from heaven, but a small light from your heart shining outward. And then, when you have chosen consciously, you will realize that life never abandoned you. It was only waiting for you to wake up and walk alongside it. From that moment on, you stop drifting. You no longer live by habit, but by soul. And that is the true beginning of living with the light you've just found, the light that is yours. 9. The integration. But when the storm has passed, you suddenly realize that silence can be more frightening than the tempest itself. No more noise, no more conflict, no more emotional waves crashing, only you, surrounded by a vast stillness. That is when many people fall into an emptiness they cannot comprehend. After a long journey of awakening, after countless falls and rises, they expect peace at last. Yet strangely, peace makes them feel lost. Like a soldier after war, they no longer know how to live when there is no battle to fight. But what happens when you stop, Jung once asked, when you cease running and look directly into your own fear? That question is not meant to frighten, but to open another doorway where you meet the dragon within, not to slay it, but to live with it. True awakening does not end at the mountain's peak. It begins when you walk back down, returning to the world. For as Jung said, no one can stay on the mountain forever. Light exists to illuminate life, not to hide us away from it. On the philosophical level, this is the stage of integration. You no longer view the world through the split lenses of light, dark, right, wrong, high, low. You begin to see the interconnectedness of all things, pain leading to understanding, failure leading to growth, loneliness leading to awakening. You no longer seek to escape the world, but to return to it with a clearer heart. Awakening is not about running from reality. It is about living within it without being ruled by it. On the psychological level, this is the subtle stage Jung called the inflation of the self, the swelling of the ego after enlightenment. Many people, after a powerful awakening experience, accidentally fall into a new trap. They believe they have understood everything, that they have risen above others. They chase the feeling of enlightenment like a new kind of dopamine, exciting, euphoric, only to feel empty again when life returns to normal. It is one of the most common illusions on the spiritual path. The human brain is addicted to stimulation. When the flash of illumination fades and the dopamine of insight subsides, we begin to feel empty. But that emptiness is not regression. It is an invitation to learn a new kind of dopamine. The dopamine of presence. The dopamine of presence does not come from victory, but from serenity in each moment. It is the quiet joy of feeling the warmth of a morning cup of water, the contentment of writing a few lines in silence, the fullness of helping someone without needing recognition. It is a form of energy that does not explode or storm, but endures and nourishes. It helps you sustain clarity without needing the spotlight of awakening. And when you understand this, you begin to step into a new layer of experience, the layer of the sage returns to the village. Jung described this archetype as an ancient symbol. The one who once climbed the mountain to seek truth now returns to the village not to preach, not to boast of knowledge, but to quietly help others kindle their own fires. He no longer seeks meaning in great questions. He becomes that meaning through the way he lives. He brews tea, writes letters, plants trees, teaches children, cares for the elderly not out of duty, but because that is how the light within him continues to burn. At this stage, you no longer need to prove that you have changed. Others will sense it in the way you speak, the way you are silent, the way you look at them without judgment. You become someone others feel safe around, not because you know more, but because you have stopped fighting yourself. And that is the deepest form of maturity Jung wanted us to understand. Integration, not separation from the darkness, but reconciliation with it. Not the destruction of the ego, but its transformation into a tool of the soul. Not climbing the mountain to attain enlightenment, but carrying the lantern down to illuminate your own village. Choose one simple act of daily life. Brew a cup of tea, write a line in your journal, walk your dog, or simply sit still for a few minutes without touching your phone, and do it with full presence. Notice every small detail, the sound of water, the light moving across your hands, the rhythm of your breath. That is the ritual Jung called the ritual of return, the ritual of coming back. There is nothing mystical about it, no monastery, no incense, only your full presence in every movement. For meditation does not reside in silence, but in every conscious act. You will realize that when you live that way, the light no longer stays, only within you it begins to spread around you. Others will feel a certain peace they cannot explain, but they will want to stay close. You no longer speak much, yet every word you say carries weight, not because you try to sound profound, but because you have passed through silence. That is when awakening reaches its expanded meaning. It is no longer just your story. You bring that understanding back into life, to love, to serve, to create. You become the bridge between light and the earth, between meditation and daily living, between soul and action. And you understand that there is no need to preach, because true light needs no words. If this video finds you after everything has become clear, stay to learn how to live with that light. Because awakening does not end with understanding. It begins with how you bring that understanding back into life, to love more deeply, to live more kindly, to work more meaningfully, and to be present as part of the light the world now needs. And when you live that way, not to become someone else, but simply to be honest with the light within you, you have completed the journey Jung called the individuation process, becoming yourself while uniting with the whole. There is no longer separation between the seeker and the worldly, between darkness and light, between suffering and peace. There remains only one thing: life itself, in its truest form. Because in the end, awakening is not about escaping the darkness, but learning how to light a lamp within it, so that whenever someone loses their way, they can see the glow from your home and know that the path back still exists. Perhaps by now, you understand why this video found you at exactly that moment. Not to change your life in an instant, but to remind you that every true transformation begins from within. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." And today is the moment you have begun to open your eyes, not to see a different world, but to see yourself more clearly within this one. Like a traveler emerging from the forest after a storm, what you carry with you is not the light of knowledge, but the small flame of presence. Don't try to hold on to this feeling, just live with it. Because awakening is not a destination. It is the way you walk each day with a conscious heart. Keep this conversation alive within yourself. And when these words resonate with you, press like and share them so that someone else, at the exact moment they need it most, may also find themselves in that same stillness. Remember, we are not here to teach you how to live, but to learn with you how to listen to yourself. For as Jung once said, people come to be healed, but they stay because they feel respected. And you, the one hearing these words, deserve to be respected, deserve to be understood, and deserve to live freely in alignment with your soul.